So what I'd like to talk a little bit about today is, in the title here, Agilely Compliant yet Insecure, Tips and Tools for Creating Secure Software in an Agile Environment. Start with a little bit about me. Way back when Commodore VIC-20 was the hot new item, I mowed 25 yards to pay for it, brought it home, hooked it up to a black and white TV, started writing basic programming, pokes and peeks and go-tos. I used to love go-tos. Later on in life, after I graduated from college, was a system administrator on various Linux systems, Sun OS, which later became Solaris, UPS, Linux. And then I went back to school and got a degree in programming. So I started on K.I.S.S, if anybody's old enough to remember K.I.S, which became ANSI C. Then I coded in Java for 15 years, and I've done assembly on various different platforms, 6502, 8088, System 390. Anybody know System 390? And then I went into project management a little bit, and then I finally evolved. I would consider myself a recovering developer doing security. So Thursday, this test is no joke. The GAT Certified Security Auto Programmer. I had her for hours after it was over. And also, as I passed out stickers to everybody a few minutes ago, or at the SkyloCon, things I did for fun. Playing volleyball with my kids. That's a league we played in a few weeks ago. And this is my assistant, Rufus. If I get tired of coding or writing some Python, he does it better than I do anyway. Quick agenda. Talk about the state of software. We'll talk about what Agile is for those of you who may not have been exposed previously. Don't fall into the trap. Anybody recognize this movie? It was made mostly right here in Asheville, called My Fellow Americans. Then we'll talk about the important stuff. How are we going to fix it? Wrap up with a short conclusion, and if anybody's got any questions, or if you got questions along the way, or if I start stuttering, just raise your hand, let me know. So let's talk about the scope of software for a minute for the people who are really new to this environment. There's literally dozens and dozens of hardware platforms. You've got ARM processors in your phone, there's Intel processors in your desktop, there's AMD processors, there's hundreds of different platforms. You've got dozens of operating systems. You've got Linux. How many flavors of Linux? OS X, which is built on Linux. All the Android operating systems, which are also built on Linux. You have Windows. Too many flavors of Windows. Hundreds of programming languages. I just saw one of our developers recently bring out something called R, which I've never seen before. So Go, Perl, Bash, Python, C, C++, Java. So you've got all these different types of applications around. Thousands of professional developers, which I was one for a while. Hundreds of thousands of applications, and I should put billions there. Billions of lines of code running. Well, there's millions of lines of code running in this room. There's billions of lines of code running in the world. And it pretty much affects everything. Games, entertainment, banking, finance. We've all been to an ATM machine or heard about D of A's problems, or Wendy's for that matter. Taxes. You can go online and pay your taxes now, so that's become a target. People are trying to hack into there to get more information. The state of South Carolina got hacked 4 years ago, and everybody who had been issued a refund, their banking information was compromised, including mine. Healthcare. What can you say about healthcare? You've got all the computers for billing and patient records and PII. But there's also crazy things like heart monitors that they send people home with that are connected via Wi-Fi, sending information directly back to the clinicians, which is great because you can get real-time information about your patient. But it's really bad because you can actually collect real-time data about somebody that you're looking for. Pacemakers, having Bluetooth turned on. I can't imagine that being an attack vector. I can't imagine it being an attack vector. I just can't imagine a person who would actually do it. But, interrupt somebody's heartbeat using a Bluetooth device. Energy. We don't have meter readers anymore. Guys, don't walk out and look at the side of your house anymore. The meters report back over the network. Transportation, cars. Look at the new Tesla. Drives itself pretty much as long as you're not sitting in the back watching a Harry Potter movie at 9 miles an hour. Communication devices, we've all got them. I see dozens of cell phones in the room. We're streaming this broadcast live out to the whole world. So lots and lots of things going on there. And the problems that you find in this software are numerous. This is National Vulnerability Database for 4 years. The number of reported vulnerabilities in the software goes up year after year. It actually stabilized in 2015, which is a good sign, I think. But we want to see it going down. We don't want more new vulnerabilities being reported every year. And as far as the effect on the economy, reports that the cost of cybercrime was 20% more than it was in 2014, so 20% higher. It's probably going to be higher than that this year. The federal government has passed legislation holding companies liable. HIPAA, for example, if you expose medical records and you were negligent in doing so, it can cost you $10,000 per record. So $10,000 per person that are affected. Civil liability suits. I read recently that earlier today there was a picture of Target when they were talking about credit cards getting hacked. Target settled for $10 million plus lawyer fees plus court costs from the hack that they had back. Imagine what that does to your company's bottom line when you got to write a check for $10 million bucks. And here's the part that our federal government does not understand. I was a DoD contractor for 6 years. Compliance does not equal security. Compliance simply reduces your attack surface. If you look at things that are exposed to the internet that you see when you do, go to any of the sites that do the scans, even Google, you see people who are putting their databases directly out on the internet. It's crazy. You're opening the door for attacks of many different vectors, as we saw earlier. You could polyglot the attacks together, so you can send one string to a web server and try to hit multiple layers all at the same time. So there's all the vulnerabilities and all the openings that you've opened up. Just a little quote from about 30 years ago now. It says security should be a part of the DevOps cycle. Security must be built into applications, not bolted on after. I don't know how many shops you've been in, but I've been in plenty of shops where they build this application, they run a scan against it when it gets to the end, and then they spend hundreds of hours and lots of money on software, hardware, trying to protect against the vulnerabilities that they should have been able to catch when they were building it in the first place. That's a lot of money out of the company's pocket that they could have saved. So there's the state of our software. So now I want to talk a little bit about what Agile is for those who haven't been exposed to it. Agile development actually began way back in the 1980s when I was still in high school. Prior to that, development really looked like a relay race. You would have, your design team would come up with or your product team would come up with an idea. And then they would pass it to the design team, who would come up with a design idea, who would pass it to the development team, who would actually start developing it. And then that would go to the testing team, and that could be just functional and load testing. And then they would pass it off to the security testing team. So you had all these gates where things were checked along the way. Agile, on the other hand, is you have a fully self-contained team that goes through the whole process. So they will start going through the process, and then as a product gets released, they'll actually start the next development process. So you get a lot of overlaps, but you're also expecting some things that I'll talk more about in just a little bit. I actually got a little bit ahead of myself. So instead of having this nice, discrete, sequential, manageable stage, it's simultaneous and organic, but it's also has taken away some of the check marks that you had in the past in waterfall. So another quick quote here from a very large 3-letter software vendor. As they started bringing Agile into their environment, they said headquarters involvement is limited to providing guidance, money, and moral support at the outset. On a day-to-day basis, top management seldom intervenes. The team is free to set its own direction. And one of their top management folks said, as upper management, we're just venture capitalists. These teams ask for money, we give them money, we go away, we wait and see what they give us back. While that does encourage a lot of things, I'll talk more about what it can also cause shortly. Don't get me wrong, as you saw in my bio, I am a certified Scrum Master. I've worked in different Scrum teams on 2 different continents. I was a Scrum Master for 3 teams in Stuttgart for a period of time. So there are advantages to it, but tying to that, if you ever get a chance to take a look at the Agile Manifesto, in theory, it's beautiful. In practice, it's a little bit more of a challenge. So we'll get into some more of that in just a minute. Along the way, for those of you who are PMP certified, I'm not yet. I will be in September. Agile development was added to the PMBOK in 2013, the Project Management Book of Knowledge, and it's being practiced by many, many organizations all over the world, including some hacker groups. So as I said, the trap's been set, the bait is right there. It looks really awesome. And I'll talk about that in just a second. So somebody comes along with a new idea, had to have a cat picture. It's required. Same thing that this 3-letter company was saying. Somebody comes up with an idea, they take a box full of money, they hand it to the Agile development team, and they're empowered to take the idea and make it into a reality. The question is, for those of us here, is it going to be a secure reality or is it going to be target? So let's talk about the advantages. I'm a glass half full kind of guy most of the time, although my children who are in the back might argue with that. So it truly does give developers a lot more visibility and control of the project. Part of what the development teams have complained about in Waterfall is it takes you 2 years to come up with a plan of how we're going to do all this. And by the time we get a plan and you can actually start working on it, it's too late. The landscape has changed. Look at the difference between an iPhone 4 and an iPhone 6. The world changed a lot. And that's a two-year change. If we look at the landscape today and we compare it to 2 years from now, if IPv6 ever actually goes anywhere, the landscape will have changed dramatically. So by giving them this visibility, getting them involved earlier, get them started building things earlier, you also get their input for things like, if I told you I want to have a petabyte of data searchable by any field, any parse field, and I want it to return back in less than 10 seconds. Most developers might balk at that, but by getting it started early and taking advantage of things, it actually does work. Also, another thing they want to take advantage of is just like we were saying, take care of the entrepreneurial spirit. Give the team this box of money, tell them that they're responsible for what's going on. It's almost like having your own small business without risking your paycheck. And keep that thought in mind, because that's going to come up again. More advantages. Developers say, you always keep shrinking our window, keep asking for more and more and more. One of the key ideas behind Agile development is it sets a sustainable pace for your development. So what's supposed to happen if you're doing Scrum, what's supposed to happen over the first 3 cycles is you're supposed to figure out how much work your team can actually do, the team of people that you've got. And then from there, for the next cycle and the next cycle and the next cycle after that, the development team only accepts that amount of work. So if they can do 60 units of work in 2 weeks, from then on, they're not going to accept a deadline that includes more than 60 units of work within those 2 weeks. So that it is something. You don't have people work until 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning trying to get stuff ready to pass off to the operations team to deploy at the last minute. The other side of it is, if it's working properly, it encourages developers to meet their commitments. If for the last 5 sprints in a row I've turned out 60 units, and for this sprint we only have 35, that's going to look really bad to your product owner, to your product management, to your manager. So there's a little push to make sure that you at least get out the same amount of work that you've been getting out when it's working properly. The next thing is every sprint you reprioritize the entire list of work that hasn't been completed yet. So if you figure out that the iPhone 7 is going to have a super camera and you're working for Samsung, maybe you make it more important to get a better camera into your product than the iPhone is going to have. So it allows you to adjust to market changes. And the other piece is delivers production-ready code of each development cycle. So the idea is if I had to stop development right now and just release this product, everything that I've done in the past is done, which we'll talk about in a second, ready to go out to the public. Now, on the other side of the room, for the glasses half empty people, absolutely, positively requires a mature development team. I've seen in government, I've seen it in commercial, I've seen it in Europe, I've seen it in the United States. We want to use Scrum, we want to be Agile, we're going to be more successful, and you take a bunch of kids with less than 2 years development experience and you say, hey, go build this. It works about as well as putting your shoes on your own feet. Not too bad. So that's a disadvantage. Another piece of it, way back when we were going from team to team to team, there was an architecture role. No form of Agile that I've seen most of them, is there an inherent system architect role. I'll explain why that's bad shortly. The other thing is like I said, you're you're reevaluating your priorities every 2 weeks in some occasions. So if you've got version 1.0 that's sitting out there, you finish the development cycle because you're working on 1.3 or whatever that hasn't been released yet, well, they find a security bug in 1.0. Your number one priority for the next sprint is going to be fix the security bug in 1.0. Well, if that comes with a functional user bug and something that's dependent on IE10 that the user can't use it, then all of a sudden you lose a sprint or 2 sprints or 3 sprints just playing whack-a-mole on the bugs that you didn't pick up along the way because you didn't have the pieces that you used to have, the gateways for the functional testing, the load testing, security testing. Once again, you're so focused on these 2-week small cycles, you can't see the forest because of the trees. All you're looking at is what's the next 2 weeks going to give me? What's the next 2 weeks going to give me? What's the next 2 weeks going to give me? And you can very easily lose your way. You end up building something that was not even remotely where you started with to go for. Any developers in the room might hate me for this one, but you tend to lean very heavily on third-party libraries. That's good. That's bad. Talk about that some more in a little bit. And then the other piece of it is now that you have all of these functions in one team, and remember, a standard Agile team is supposed to be a max of 7 people. So you've got to have design, development, testing, security, platform knowledge, operating system knowledge. There's some more I'll get to in a few minutes. All on this small team. And what tends to happen is, it even happens on my team right now, my current job. I'm the Java guy. I'm the only guy on the team who's ever written Java. Something comes down the pipe that's Java, they move it up to the top of the queue, and there's Tom's work for the next 2 weeks. So, by doing that, you're defeating what you were trying to get to, which I'll talk about in a minute when we're fixing it. Another disadvantage from a hiring perspective is you got to have people who are willing to be Swiss Army knives. They've got to have a lot of different backgrounds, and they got to be willing to use it. As a manager, when I was a manager a few years back, I had one very talented individual who knew Java and knew Linux, but all he wanted to do was develop code. So when I needed something done to the platform to make it run better, he had no interest in helping me. So you've got to have multidisciplinary backgrounds of people who are willing to use it. Now for my favorite part of Agile. Absolute favorite part. Each development cycle is a finite amount of time. 2 weeks. If you're doing it right, you're going to kick off an automatic build at 10 o'clock on Friday morning or Thursday morning or whatever day it is, and that's it. Nothing else gets into the build. That's supposed to be production-ready code. Now, if I ask a developer, when is it done, what's the developer going to tell me?
When the test pass.
Unit test? Wow, you're a little farther ahead of some of the developers.
No, full integration testing, automated tests from the back end all the way to the UI.
I can still disagree with that.
Okay.
But most developers you ask, as soon as it compiles in their IDE, they're done. If you ask a tester, it's when the functional test passed. If you ask the build manager, he's going to say when all the automated tests pass.
I'm a senior development manager teams.
If you ask somebody who has to deal with customers on a regular basis, like me, I'm going to tell you that when the coding's done, when the functional tests pass, when the security tests pass, when the load testing pass, because God help you, you try to do something that runs great at 4,000 events per second to 160,000 events per second and it blows up. And it only happens on this one customer because you've only got one customer that's that big. That's it. It's documented. Oh my goodness. Don't get me started on documentation.
Good documentation.
And it's documented correctly, and it's in documents that the customer can actually get to. So, the definition is very fluid. When you get into a more mature shop with mature developers who have actually had to get on customer calls once in a while, they understand all these things. But the kids who are coming straight out of school, not so much. So that's actually in my, it is one of my fixes as we go forward.
The way I can say since I'm interrupted, he's right. I mean, this is true.
So can we fix it? That's the big thing. I mean, Agile is popular. It's growing. There's amazing success stories with it. There's also epic fails. So the first thing you got to do is focus on your team. You have to build your team very, very carefully. Cross-functional team members don't grow on trees, and they're not cheap. Trust me, if you want to hire me, it's not cheap. At the same time, you've got your group of seven, 5, 6, 7, however many's on your team going into it. You can afford one new guy. That's it. If you look at what, let's see, they just got bought out. I can't remember the new name. It used to be CollabNet. They say you can have 2 inexperienced people on your team. If you want your guys to burn out, go for it. But really, you've only got time to pull up one person with each team. And if you also look at the notes from CollabNet, which is where I got my Scrum Master certification, they say team stability, team stability, team stability, team stability. I will argue that there's one thing that's more important than team stability: having the right mix of people to do the job. If I've got my team that's been together for 2 years, and I've been doing back-end stuff, and I'm going into a web environment now, I've got to have somebody who knows web security. Have to. And if I have to break up my team and go through the 3 sprints to get our work measured out again, it's the cost of doing business. Otherwise, if you stick with the same team with the wrong skill mixture, it's going to turn out a lot worse. Still focusing on your team. With great power comes great responsibility. It's a quote that I think my grandfather told me when I was probably 7 or 8 years old, when he was actually letting me drive the riding lawnmower. Agile teams are treated like startups. Each person has to pull their own weight. Each person has to be willing to give up. Can't watch Mr. Robot live. I got to watch it on the TiVo tomorrow morning before I go to work. Or have to cancel dinner reservations at certain times. Not all the time, but at certain times to take care of it. There's a team that I'm really, really, really close to. Not to mention any names, but for the last 5 sprints in a row, they've committed to 120 units of work. They've completed 45. And 45 is the high water mark that they've met since this team was formed. If you commit to it, get it done. Those of you who play baseball, volleyball, if you yell mine, you got to go get the ball. Doesn't matter how far the wind pushes it, you got to go get it. Same thing here. If the team sits down and says, we commit to doing this work, you got to get it done. If you don't, you're going to disappoint your team. You're going to disappoint the product owner for sure, because he's expecting to have this ready to release. You're going to it disappoints your management, and it's going to affect the bottom line. And the other piece of it is if your team has someone who's not, skipping Mr. Robot when they need to, you got to find a way to bring them back in. Do your part when you're working together. Help your teammates make sure that they do their part. It's not going to work otherwise. Collaboration. I'll say it again right here at the bottom, and I'll start from the bottom and go up. Don't single out the Java guy and just hand him the Java stuff and say, go do it, and the rest of the team hide under a rock. Pair programming is not just about code review. It's about coming up with different ideas. It's also about bringing up the new guy on the team, or somebody who wrote something awful like C#. Get them into the Java world, so that way that the team can actually develop, so that you're all Swiss Army knives to do the different pieces of it. If you don't, as soon as I'm in the lottery, I got a ticket for tonight, then the team's going to be in trouble because they're not going to have that skill set anymore. Communicate all the things. It can be distracting, but I've got, my company was unfortunate enough to choose HipChat as our chat client, or chat tool. I keep it up in the background all the time. I come across something interesting, it goes out to the rest of my team, so we're not redoing the same stuff over and over again. Stand-ups are not optional. The hardest thing I had to get across to the teams in Germany, 8:30 stand-up means 8:30 stand-up. And don't just show up with a cup of coffee in your hand and say, yeah, I'm working on whatever you told me to work on yesterday, and then take a sip of your coffee and hand the bean back to the next person. Show up, be awake, communicate things, actually talk about what you're doing. If you have a problem, don't be embarrassed to bring it up. Use your 2 minutes wisely before you hand it to the next person. And then just listen to the other people. Sometimes they'll come up with something that you can help them with. Stakeholder involvement. Let's talk about stakeholders for a second. No more deal. Okay. Somebody who has a security focus has got to be a stakeholder. It's the only way it's going to work. Product owners typically are business analysts or investors. You've got to have somebody who's got a security focus as one of your stakeholders. And then the stakeholders showing up every 2 weeks to the reveal, it's got to happen. Even the ones who are security focused, so that they can take a look at it and make sure that you're doing the things that you say that you're going to be doing. The next one, from an operational standpoint, thank you, sir. K.I.S.S. Keep it simple, son. The modern applications, especially like the one that I work on, it has hundreds of moving parts. And as the developers keep relying more and more on these third-party solutions, you see somebody who wants to do something in Ruby, and somebody who wants to do something in Go, and somebody who wants to do something in Python. From an operational standpoint, it's impossible. And if you weigh the long-term costs, developers are expensive. Like I said, I wasn't cheap when I was a developer. But a developer works on something for a few months. The operational guys are going to have to support this stuff for 5 years, 7 years. So even if it takes a little more development time up front, you've got to keep things simple. Einstein's quote here, everything should be made as simple as possible, but not simply. And Then I've got another one I picked up along the way. There are two ways of constructing a software design. One way is to make it so simple that there are obviously no deficiencies, and the other way is to make it so complicated there are no obvious deficiencies. The second one will cost you a lot of money down the road. Always. I mentioned it below. The operational guys work 24/7, and they're having to support 10 different programming languages running on a couple of different platforms. It's going to cost you in the long run. And my last regular slide here, you got to understand your risks. That's why one of your stakeholders has got to be a security-focused person. Know your application top to bottom. The worst feeling when I've gone to development and engineering groups previously is I'll ask somebody on an Agile team, can you help me figure out why it's not returning what I'm expecting? Oh, Bill did that. Bill's at lunch. He'll be back about 2:30. You can't do that in an Agile environment. You just can't. Everybody's got to be Swiss Army knife enough like to be able to help out. If there's a 16-year-old kid has a breakdown out here in front of the office building, I'm not a mechanic. I've never been a mechanic. I've never wanted to be a mechanic in my entire life. But I'll open the hood and I'll tap around on some of the theory that I know and try to help the kid get the car started. When I'm dealing with a customer, I'm the 16-year-old kid and I need help. So the team's got to be able to do that. Test your environment. AWS gives you some grand promises of security when they set up your VPC and give it to you. There's vulnerabilities in it. So whatever environment you're building on, make sure you do some basic security testing there. Test your code. Unit tests are not good enough ever because there's no negative testing there. When a developer writes a unit test, he writes it based on what he expects the code to do. He's not going to throw the big polystring at it that we saw earlier this morning into a text box and send it through to your web app to see what happens.
He will if there's an abuser story about that. Oh no, he will. That's how you get those injected in the natural process.
Agreed. Test your third-party solutions. I'll beat on Java for a second. Struts is a perfect example. They shipped out example code that many developers, including myself, when we were first starting to learn struts, copied, pasted into our IDE, started the application running. Let's see, there was cross-site scripting vulnerabilities, there was information leakage, there were no final blocks. So, test your third-party solutions before you actually build them into your environment. If it's a matter of time, I would say that an hour to test up front is better than bolting a whole bunch of stuff on and then trying to test it later. And if you end up having to switch it out, you're paying 3 times as much. Train your development teams. I'm not kidding, that GAC test was hard. And I've been doing this a long time. So get them out there. Send them to a conference like this. The money is definitely going to be worth it in the long run. SANS courses aren't cheap. Mine was $2,500. Then $500 to take the test. But in the end, it pays off. Prioritize reducing your risks. If you've got a static HTML website and somebody finds cross-site scripting in it that's not persistent, maybe you don't need to make that the number one priority to fix. But if it's a backdoor that gives somebody access to 100,000 medical records, that's a little bit different story. So you gotta prioritize it where it makes sense. Let's see. So, anybody have any questions at this point? At least everybody looks like they're still awake, unless you can sleep with your eyes open, which is kind of big. I used to have a cat who do that.
Question? What's a unit?
What's a unit of work? It's defined by the team. So a unit could be an hour's worth of work. It could be half a day's worth of work. It could be a day's worth of work. So it all depends on the team. Kind of figures out a baseline. So if I'm writing a function to do something, it takes this long to do it. That's my smallest unit of work. So then when I look at the requirements that are coming in for the next story, user story, I can take that small piece of work and say, that should take about 10 times as long, so it's going to take 10 units of work. So it's a relative scale. Every team has a different value for it. Sure.
Can I share just like one example? So on our team, we use story points, which is equivalent to what is 1 units. And so let's say we're doing backlog grooming on a Monday to lead off the sprint. So maybe we have a story like, as a user, I want to see that I have this information on my dashboard and I can do this and this. So during that, as developers, we'll look at that and we'll use 0 points. We almost never use that. We technically mean it's no effort at all, like it's a typo fix or something. But in practice, everything's at least 1 point. So 1 point's like, either no time up to an hour or two. 2 points is half a day-ish. Some are going to be higher or lower. 3 points is a full day. 5 points means that it's a little bit more than a day, but you're getting in the zone that it really needs to be more than one story. And 8 points means, it needs to be broken up further before it can really be estimated. And because of the law of averages, that actually helps you track velocity very well, as simple as that is. So what your gut checking to say is like this work that I know, and then you're voting between like 2 or 3 developers, like you're playing poker, to decide like what value to assign to that. And that's where that comes from. As the team works together, it's shockingly accurate using this mechanism at predicting work.
As long as you don't bite off too big of pieces, which
well, that's
the team does. But yeah, you could also, to put it a little more practical, let's say it takes me 45 minutes to mow a half an acre, which is what my house sits on. I know if I'm going to go mow somebody else's yard that's got a half an acre on pretty flat land, it should take me 45 minutes. But if I'm going to go mow 5 acres up on the side of Eagles Nest Mountain, that this lady has a nice summer cottage up there, it should take me about 6 times as long. So then that's kind of how you estimate your work units. So
Units are it's really a team measure because you aggregate and you do process improvement.
Right. So the main thing is consistency. Obviously, you can shift over time, but you're not just making up your metric every time you think about it.
Good.
So I've got.
It tries to solve a fundamental problem in development in that development is inherently difficult to estimate accurately because there's so many parts that are sort of up in the air. Like until you built it, you don't really know what it's going to take to build it. It's not like a house where it's very measured, like measurements, and this is what 2x4s cost, and we need this many of them. That's very measurable. I'm sorry.
Sure. No, that's fine. I was just going to say, for those of you who download the slides from the website when they're posted, I've got references to everything I referenced along the way. Finally, thank you. Thank you all for putting up with me. Thank you to Bsides.